Hello, my name is Andy of Govprep. Today we're going to be going over the actual bid and solicitation process. So let's pick back up where we left off on the previous video from federal fiscal year. And if you haven't watched that video, I would recommend watching the federal fiscal cycle first and then watching this video as a follow-on. So like I said, let's jump right in. The process that contracting officers use to go through acquisitions, procurements, contracting, it's defined by the Federal Acquisition Regulation, commonly referred to as the FAR. In the FAR, there's lots of steps that are optional and some are required, depending on the size of the contract, the dollar value estimated for the contract. So I'm going to talk through what the most generic process is, and then kind of walk through what those look like in the procurement phase when you're actually looking at them on the different websites. So remember back also to the 4 legs of the table, the stakeholders video. The boss or the commander or the director of the office or agency sets their budget objectives at the beginning of the year. This is what the agency is going to work on. These are the things that are important. This is the checklist. These are the things that we're going to prioritize as an agency and try and get done by the end of the year to meet our mission objectives. So that's what the direction, if you will, the direction of the agency is going to be. That's set at the top level of the agency, and then the rest of the organization follows suit with that, and they move forward based on that direction. That direction is typically published on the agency's website, whether that's the high-level Department of Defense or service-level Department of the Air Force or whatnot, on down to specific offices like different VISNs for the Veterans Affairs or the different Army Corps of Engineers offices, regional offices. Each office is going to have its directions based on the chain of commands directions. So that's what that first step is budget objectives. You can go to the customers, the clients' websites to see what the agency's objectives are. From that, the end user that works for that boss or that director, that commander, is going to take those directions and say, okay, here, based on that general direction, here are the specific programs or projects that we need to fund in order to get us there. So more granular, more detailed. Just typically, these are just identified as project names on a spreadsheet on the agency's website. There's not going to be any guarantee of funding. There's not going to be any promises, but that's what that looks like if you're able to come across those. You can do research and find those. Those are going to turn into needs statements from the end user. Here's the things that we need. That needs statement is going to be handed over to the contracting officer. The contracting officer is going to do their thing and translate it. There's a lot of details here, guys, so just bear with me. But that needs statement might specify a certain manufacturer equipment. If the contracting officer doesn't think that that specific equipment needs to be used, they can pull out what's called the salient details and develop a statement of work, or the contracting officer can go through this pre-solicitation phase, and they can look at requests for information and do some sources sought. So that request for information is the contracting officer saying, okay, I don't know as a contracting officer what the heck this requirement is. So educate me on what it is, if I'm buying markers or chairs or building battleships or installing the latest, greatest video teleconferencing system, whatever it may be, that request for information step allows the contracting officer to ask questions or to kind of seek guidance from industry, from us, to say, hey, educate me on what it is that's in this world, because they might not know. It's a great opportunity for you to get your name out there. They're not looking for pricing. There aren't enough details known about the opportunity to provide pricing. So you are not required to provide pricing at this point. All they're looking for is what are the different options for this general category that they're shopping for. Don't provide information, but don't worry or don't hold back from providing info if you're worried that they're going to actually purchase off of that. You want to definitely throw your hat in the ring. You definitely want to get your name in front of the contracting officer, because that'll benefit you down the road. We'll start talking about that now. Sources sought shifts the conversation from stuff to companies. So in the RFI phase, the contracting officer is looking at stuff. They're looking at the services that can be offered or the products that can be purchased, or that level of detail. In the sources sought phase, now the contracting officer is looking at what companies can actually provide that service. In both the RFI stage and the sources sought stage, the contracting officer has an option. They can do a set-aside contract. And this is why it benefits you to reply to RFIs and sources soughts if you are able to. Again, they're not looking for details. They're not looking for pricing information. They're just looking for, this is the type, this is the standard, this is the specification, this is what it is that I can tell you right now. They're not looking to order off of it right away. But again, what that allows the contracting officer to do is do a set-aside contract depending on the responses that they get. It's called the rule of two. So if there are, let's say our contracting officer puts out a request for information and they get 2 responses, or let's say 3 responses from woman-owned small businesses. Well, now that contracting officer who has a requirement to do a certain percentage of work with woman-owned small businesses, now that contracting officer can set aside that effort, that specific contract, to only be competed against, amongst woman-owned small businesses. Likewise with veteran-owned businesses, with 8A companies, Hub Zone, each of the categories has that authorization. So if you are interested at all in an RFI or a sources sought, respond to it, because you might be that second response that allows the contracting officer to set aside. So now, instead of competing full and open, competing against everybody else, all other companies that might be going after that effort, you've limited competition to only companies in that set aside category: woman-owned, minority-owned, Hub Zone, veteran-owned, for example. So keep that in mind. Definitely a stage that you want to respond to, even though it's early. Next up is Industry Day. Industry Days are kind of a reverse presentation. So all folks, all companies that have shown interest, maybe those that responded to the RFI or the sources sought, or those that just responded to the special notice for the Industry Day, all those companies can sign up to go to a location or virtualized, like a Zoom meeting or whatnot, and listen to the contracting officer and end user, and oftentimes the commander is there, but the contracting officer runs those meetings. And typically the Industry Day is the contracting officer describing in his or her own words and showing a PowerPoint presentation of what the opportunity actually is. So this is also an opportunity for you to gauge and see who the competition is. Because if you are in an auditorium full of other companies' representatives, then you know that there's going to be stiff competition in that on that contract. So the other thing to remember here is, on Industry Days, be careful asking questions. By all means, if you have questions, feel free, but when you stand up, remember you're talking to the customer, but you're also asking a question in front of all of your competition. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. The contracting officer can be impressed or turned off by your question. Boy, that was a really dumb question. And hopefully you're not wearing your company shirt. Or you could put a target on your back for all these other companies, all your other competition, to say, hey, I'm gonna take this guy. Or on the good side, it could be an opportunity for partnering, or maybe if it's a highly technical effort. I've been part of industry days where somebody asked a highly technical question that my team wasn't even considering. And we took a second look at that opportunity. Hey, are we sure this is something that we understand and something that we really want to go after? So there can be benefit, but also detriment to industry days. I would attend. I typically attend quietly, take notes, take lots and lots of notes, and if they let you, take lots and lots of pictures. This is very common for site surveys. If you are in cleaning, janitorial or custodial or construction, information technology, any of those types of industries where you need to actually see the site before you can accurately bid on the job. So look for those industry days or site surveys. That will typically drive into a draft RFP, which is just what it sounds, a draft request for proposal. That draft is still in good idea phase. It's a little bit more mature. They've gotten more definition on the statement of work and what they expect, what the contract officer expects to have happen, but they're still open to suggestions. So in the draft phase, and even in the RFP phase, you can ask questions by all means. Understand that when you ask questions, your questions are going to be recorded, and then posted to everybody else publicly. So don't think that you're just having this side conversation with the contracting officer. Actually, at that point, that's when you need to stop having conversations with the contracting officer, and all communication shifts to email, because you do not want to be OCI'd out of competition. What that means is official conflict of interest. You are setting, think of this as insider trading. We hear about, congressmen or CEOs and executives for, publicly traded companies selling off all their stock before, bad news comes out. Well, that's inside. If you've got, inside information that nobody else has, you have an undue advantage that disenfranchises the rest of the competition. Well, that's the same thing in this industry, in this world. You are not allowed to have undue influence or inside information, if you will, in the contracting process. So where's that line? Well, that line's right there. Once that draft, I usually like to back that line up for draft RFP. Once that RFP, whether draft or final, once that RFP is posted or hits the street, as is commonly said, or is public knowledge, right? So that's what it means. When it's public knowledge, that's when you no longer have conversations. You don't pick up the phone anymore to talk to the contracting officer. When you have a question, you send your question formally to the contracting officer. The contracting officer will gather all the information. Do not try and call the end user, because the end user will not answer. And if they do answer, you are putting yourself at risk. You're putting yourself at risk for being disqualified from competition. So be very careful about that. Next thing is everybody reviews the proposal, does the Q&A, questions and answers. Maybe an amendment or two or 100 get sent out for the RFP. So keep track of those. Some submissions are done, right? So at that point in time, that's when you submit the proposal. And then the contract team, the government, will review the proposals that are received. So you can sometimes large proposals move into orals. That's just where some of the candidates, if you will, some of the candidates are called in to give verbal descriptions or verbal discussions about their presentation. Usually it's a presentation, not a discussion, because there's another phase, discussions. When you've shifted from orals to discussions, that's when you know you're really in that small group. You're within like 5 companies of winning the effort. You're making the cut. And best and final offer, you're within like 2 or 3 companies of getting the award. Then once all that's done, the government will close the doors and they will do their source selection. Now, a whole lot goes into the source selection depending on the size of the effort. If it's very, very technical, there can be a technical evaluation board. I'll do another video about the types of awards, whether it's going to be an LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable, or a best value. So that's something to keep in mind. But these are all things that happen inside, behind the closed doors government side. They're gonna select the winner, and then the government will announce. The contracting officer will announce who the awardee is. Now, once you have been notified, you have 10 days from notification to request a debriefing, and if you so desire, post a protest. I am not an attorney, so you need to consult an attorney to do that protest process. Same thing with industry days. That's a double-edged sword. If you have good reason to protest, then by all means. But if you're just protesting to, show that you're upset for losing, then that's probably going to burn any bridges that you might have with that agency in future proposal or for future contract efforts. So, as a good rule of thumb, I always like to request a debriefing, whether I win or lose. And that's kind of a odd thing to think about. But if you win, I sure like to know what it was that I did what it was that was in my proposal that caught their eye. Was it actually the price? I mean, in an LPTA it is. Or if it's a best value, was it an extended warranty? Was it my installation plan? What was it that caught their eye? And in a losing proposal, I really want to know why I lost so that I can do better next time. So that, in a nutshell, is the proposal process. Let me show you very quickly what the efforts actually look like. So if I am looking for, I'll just do a couple real quick here. So if I'm in sam.gov, I can go to contract opportunities here, and I can look for, let's say, landscaping. So that's the type of work I'm in. I'm just going to do a quick keyword search for landscaping. Notice that I'm getting all sorts of old proposals from some, 2016, 2020. So I'm going to put response due dates for a couple weeks out, just so I can see a better idea of what is forward facing, what's in the future. And then I might look for the different types of opportunities that are here. So original pre-solicitation, original solicitation. This tells me where in that timeline the proposal is in the process. So if I wanted to see, let's say, for example, RFI, then I'm going to see, do the same filter here. And I can do multiple words if I wanted to, but let's do RFIs. Current response date, storage and infrastructure as service, request for information. So this one is not set aside for any small business yet, which makes sense because the contracting officer is going to make that determination based on what responses they get. If they get 2 responses from woman-owned small businesses, then this might be a WOSB. So to be determined. It's IT related, 541519 NICS code, and I can get a brief description of what it is that the effort is doing. So again, there's not a whole lot of detail here. There's some Q&A and some requests for information here, but it's thin on the details because it's, again, an RFI stage. So I'm going to get some information on how to respond, and we'll talk about that in another video, but just so you know, that's what a request for information looks like. It's in early stages. And then if I go back, I can look for that landscaping one, Make sure my filter's on with the dates. And then I'm going to find a solicitation. So let's just pick the top one here. So it's a solicitation. It's coming up due in a couple weeks. It's a total small business set aside, which tells me that the contracting officer got at least 2 responses, or knows that there will be at least 2 companies, 2 small businesses that can respond. They might or might not have actually gotten specific categories: woman-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, but they got small business responses. So that allows them in that more broad category of total small business. And then down here, I can see the information and the documents for the response here. So this document, since it's now in RFI stage, or in request for proposal stage, I see that it's much more formal. This is a standard 1449, so standard form 1449. You're going to see this a whole lot in government contracting, regardless of the agency that you're dealing with. But for today's purposes, for the process, when you see a document like this, you know that you're in solicitation phase. So that is a good clue. So I appreciate your time, everyone, and hopefully that helps you navigate the acquisition process.